Hi everyone, and welcome. Today we are joined by Andrei Martyanov, an author and military analyst, an expert on the Russian military as well as naval strategy. We can also add that Martyanov is a former officer, but later on also a director in commercial aerospace in the United States. Welcome back to the program.
My pleasure.
Yeah, I wanted to discuss with you the current developments as well as the weakening position of NATO, not just in Ukraine but the overall structure. But first, I guess a good point or a good place to start is this seemingly failed peace plan. That is, President Trump pushed this peace plan, which was immediately rejected by Zelensky, and shortly thereafter, Russia started a very powerful missile and drone strike on Ukraine, and this was then followed up by offensive across the front line, it seems, in which Russia's broken through several of the defense lines in Ukraine. So now, I guess around Chasiv Yar and Toretsk especially is of great importance. I was just wondering first, what do you make of these developments? And do you think the Russians are pursuing a military solution now that I guess diplomatic one seems somewhat weak?
I think military solution never was off the table to start with. It's just kind of like background thing. And whatever happens after this, because it's a battlefield. If anybody thinks that the diplomacy itself is going to solve something, I want to remind my favorite quotation from Zhou Enlai, the premier of China, in 1954, that he rephrased famous Clausewitzian dictum that, but he turned it to 180 degrees or 360 degrees per Annalena Baerbock, that the diplomacy is the continuation of the war by other means. Battlefield and balance of power always decided everything and will continue to decide. Diplomats merely act upon the realities on the ground. They try to, bend them and turn them into the favor of the country they represent. But truth is, it's battlefield. And in terms of military solutions, so to speak, it never was in doubt. Everybody understands now, especially after what has been committed in Kursk Oblast, especially the level of atrocities they committed, that there will be no, classic ceasefire in the sense of what Mr. Trump wants, because he doesn't want peace. He wants ceasefire. Russians want peace, and Russians wanting peace is predicated on destroying Zelensky regime. And not only Zelensky regime. Zelensky is merely the puppet, actually. It is the regime itself, which is obviously fed from the by the Western money, Western special services, especially nowadays with United Kingdom, which plays a critical role in all this mayhem, and United States still being part of it. So it's military solution all along, and after that, it's the what would be called the operations by the special forces and intelligence services and Ministry of Internal Affairs to clean up the what will be remaining of this Nazi regime. Let's go, and let's say what it is. It is, and it's pretty much military.
Yeah, well, it's interesting with this ceasefire. I mean, Macron recently made some comments to the media in which he said, if Putin wants peace, actually, Putin doesn't want peace. He said he's lying because if he wanted peace, he wouldn't be attacking Ukraine. So it was very, clear dichotomy. So either, you're for peace and don't do any attacks, or, or you're a liar. But in the same segment, he also calls for an unconditional ceasefire. And given that Putin hasn't accepted this, that means he doesn't want peace.
Quand le président Poutine parle aux négociateurs américains, il leur dit « je veux la paix ». Quand il parle à la planète entière, il dit « moi je veux la paix ». Il continue de bombarder l'Ukraine. Il continue de tuer des vies en Ukraine. Il n'y a qu'une seule réponse qu'on attend. Est-ce que le président Poutine est d'accord pour un cessez-le-feu inconditionnel?
I watched it, and what struck me, I guess, was it seemed a bit deceptive because if you wanted peace, you would talk about the political settlement. Again, when you say
Yeah.
unconditional ceasefire, it implies you leave out the entire political solution. But wouldn't that just be another Minsk agreement? And if so, what would be required for Russia, you think, to accept political, well, what kind of political settlement would be have to be accepted to end the war?
I just can quote Lavrov, and I can quote Putin actually too. And root causes, remove root causes, and then there you go. So let's talk. But the problem is, of course, and as have been stated many times by many people, me included, that it's peremptory. It's designed to be rejected because Russians are not stupid. They understand the nature of the modern West, or for that matter, even the Old West. And the idea behind the essentially NATO, Article 5 and all that, it's all about that. It's going to be rejected. But Russians are not in a hurry because they see the dynamics within NATO. And as many military professionals spoke about it, well, NATO is a dead man walking, So, and Russians have no reason to rush to anything, because in the end, it is going to be primarily a modus vivendi between Russia and United States, if United States matures enough to deal with this in a proper way. Europe is, I am on record for the last 10 years, essentially. It doesn't matter in many respects because it has no resources to continue to, well, create any kind of the real military threat in the first quarter of the 21st century. If, God forbid, somebody will have enough stupidity, if you wish, to do something about it, Europe will be turned into the parking lot, and that will take only 25 minutes. But they know it. And that is why, when, for example, we talk about Macron, it is all verbal maneuvering, period. There is no substance behind it. The economies of Europe are hollow when it comes down to their real correlation forces and means. Their militaries, I mean, if you look attentively at the French military, which is the best military by default in Europe, it's a joke. I mean, it's not a military. I mean, if you look attentively at the levels of their technical readiness of their, for example, already minuscule park of, let's say, tanks or air force, it's a third world with some pieces of the modern technology, and they do not have any kind of integrated system of running the modern 21st century warfare. United States doesn't have it anymore, but forget about France or Germany. Bundeswehr is worse than a joke. It's non-existent military force. The same goes for the United Kingdom. So if they think that they can somehow issue all those or provide the mission of some money which will merely, accelerate the inflation, high level of inflation, they will not buy much for it anyway. But then again, you need the critical and systemic modernization and reforms of its military. They cannot do that. There's nothing there.
Well, you just called NATO a dead man walking, and well, I'm reminded of an article in the Washington Post back in 2023 after the very disastrous counteroffensive, which the Americans and British pushed the Ukrainians to do, even against the advice of military commanders within Ukraine. So it was an interesting case study of who was actually running the war. Anyways, in that article, it called, despite the massacre of the Ukrainian army, it said obviously it wasn't a victory for Ukraine, but it has been a victory for NATO. It said because been quite a windfall, I think the word was. A great success because it had created more demand for NATO. Now suddenly NATO has obviously realized that it has still had purpose. NATO was expanding. Germany had thrown away all ambitions about working with Russia and would instead militarize. And suddenly the whole military bloc was focused. We have a new enemy again, a purpose. And but I think a lot of this was premised on defeating the Russians in Ukraine. And In contrast, it appears that NATO has been defeated. That is, it does not have any more weapons, and now we see the United States pulling out, not just out of Ukraine, but they're also very openly expressing the desire to pull out of Europe and will prioritize, has a strategic priorities around the world, such as Asia or the Western Hemisphere. So with the absence of the Americans, the Europeans will likely be divided as well, which begs the question, what is happening to this Cold War bloc with the Soviet Union obviously long gone? What do you see of the future of NATO, though? Is it can it recover from this? Because I remember saying, well, like a year ago, that the future of NATO was a bit uncertain, and it was dismissed as all Russian propaganda. This is, it would recover and it would be stronger than ever. But even now, some of those people, who appear to be smearing, recognizes that things are not going well within the military bloc.
Well, first, we need to keep in mind that all normal people, mentally sound and competent, they do not work in Washington Post or New York Times. There are very few of them, if any, in Council for Foreign Relations. Then you go into the British think tanks. It's a circus, essentially. It's a bunch of the nincompoops and clowns, with credentialed imbeciles running around pretending that they're making out of the thin air things which they do not understand, obviously. They pretend that they know what strategy is. They don't. There's not a single American general who understands actually what strategy is, let alone if we talk about European. So Europeans will be back at the square one, but this time under the sword of Damocles of Russian nuclear and conventional potential, and they will do probably what they were doing for the last 1,000 years, going at the throats of each other. So that's what it is. That's what Europe is, essentially, for all its great achievements, which we venerate and we love them, which were born essentially out of the constant warfare and killing each other in industrial quantities. So Europe will be back at it, and Russians don't care if they will begin to cut each other, completely, because in the end, it's, Russians have their own national interest and they don't care. As long as it stays away from Russia. So, in this respect, I can quote only Douglas Macgregor, Colonel Douglas Macgregor, Colonel Daniel Davis. They were on record about 2 weeks ago on their show, and Doug Macgregor stated, Danny, you remember, 97, we have been in Germany. I already told you that NATO is the dead man walking, we knew it's not a real military alliance. It's a bunch of basically it's a laundromat. And so anybody who comes from Washington Post or whatever, and tries to pretend and put the fine and joyful face on, you have to be an imbecile, honestly, to say that, we got defeated. We got defeated at Krimki. We got defeated in counteroffensive. By the time we were planning counteroffensive, second iteration of the armed forces of Ukraine together with mercenaries have been finished off. It's like, dudes, you do not even understand what war is. And this is the issue which cannot be addressed apart from the economic issues, apart from the issues of the technology, R&D, technological development, where you have to go with the tactical and operational realities. You just literally cannot explain this to them. Because most of them, not all, some of them do understand this. And like Macron, can you imagine me explaining to Macron what correlation of forces and means is? Many French generals don't understand that. Some do, though. And they're already writing the, letters to him, open letters and things of this nature. It's a mayhem. And we are dealing with the world where the financial capitalism, as it was, the parasite, as Michael Hudson says, is collapsing the civilization. Because in the end, as strange as it sounds, Vladimir Lenin, you may not, I'm not communist. I mean, I'm not Marxist, but I use, Marxist method when need be. And you read Lenin's famous article, is the whole work actually pretty substantial. Imperialism is the highest stage of the development of capitalism. My gosh, he predicted it all. Banking, financial capitalism, which begins to consume productive societies of the West. And that is exactly what had happened. And now you have this bunch bunch of nincompoops who only know how to make money out of the thin air. They believe that stock market somehow reflects the economy, and they have been essentially taken by somebody and smashed, across the brick wall of the reality. And reality is a very different thing. And when we look attentively at this, yeah, NATO is over, essentially. I cannot even imagine how they can now, if you leave Europeans alone. The United States is not going to abandon NATO completely. It's all, of course, it's all PR and it's all Trump's hot air ballooning. But the point is, if you look attentively at the technical foundation of NATO, it is obsolete. And I'm talking about the United States too. It is absolutely obsolete. The thing which drives modern geopolitics, it's not some kind of the ideas. Most of them are detached from the reality. It's the real military industrial potentials and COFM, correlation of forces, and means this is what the main engine of the history. That's why Marxists and Soviet Russian Marxists understood this. That's why they hated in the West, because they suddenly say, yeah, we know this magic thing, magic wand, that this is how you have to talk to the West. And that's why they hate everybody, and they had Stalin because he industrialized Soviet Union and things of this nature, which in the end, the 9th of May coming, Victory Day, and defeated essentially what Europe has become at that time, because it wasn't just Hitler or Germany, it was the whole Europe which invaded Soviet Union. So, and what can I say? They are not happy, but nothing they can do about it.
Yeah, it looks like after the EU failed to deliver on economic benefits for its members, they're now referring to geopolitical EU, which means more militarized version. I think the French, they see some benefit in this because in an economic EU, the leadership will be the German, but in the more militarized, they will have to pass over the mantle to the French. But again, it doesn't seem like Russia will be enough as a boogeyman to keep the EU together, because we already see, you mentioned the 9th of May celebrations in Moscow. You already have the Hungarians, at least the Slovakians, who will attend the marginal in the parade in Moscow. So and this is despite threats from the European Union. So that there is, things are already fragmenting a bit, and it seems as if the Italians are already starting to scale back on the military supplies as well. So something seems to be going on. But let's say that the political settlement can't be done. It's not possible. What would a military solution look like now? Because surely Russia doesn't want to go to Western Ukraine. This
No,
seems terrible.
no.
But if they want to avoid a kind of a prolonged guerrilla warfare, a never-ending war, another 20-year Afghanistan, what would be a military solution look like for Russia if whatever remains of Ukraine will continue to be pumped full of weapons?
Well, that's one of the mistakes, by the way, which, Washington, those strategists, quote unquote, they're not strategists. They were, Afghanistan, let's get Russians, into this mayhem. And well, they didn't study the history of the war in Afghanistan. But the point is, it's not the 40th Army, which was less than 100,000 in fighting in Afghanistan, and actually was significantly less. It's a completely different story here. But the point is that, weapons, terrorism, absolutely, Ukraine will remain the cesspool of terrorist activities. There's no doubt about it. But as already stated, it's very difficult to say now. For example, just before we went on air here, Russians took already major village. It's very large, actually. It's probably town of Kamenka in Kharkov area already, Sue me, well, it's pretty much the next thing, you know. So things change so fast. You don't even know how to follow them because General Staff and Putin do not disclose their plans. And the only thing which is left for us is to watch, you know. But as I stated long time, uh, um, Russians wouldn't mind some political settlement in the sense that they will be governing not being the part of Russia. You know, Russians do not want to spend much money. They want political changes there. For example, Odessa, Nikolaev, and even Kiev, you know. So they will have their proxy sitting there. And then it will take the long time, which will be, of course, completely insulated from any NATO influences, while you have to essentially another generation of Ukrainians to simply age and die out before you can say that, okay, this is the new generation, which actually can appreciate what has been done to them by the West and whom they trusted, and they can start at least some kind of healing process. Right now, overwhelming majority of Russian population doesn't want to deal with Ukrainians, not just with Ukraine, with Ukrainians as people. There is an overwhelming feel among Russian people now that they're not brotherly people, which it's true, they are not. And as the result, we have this probably prolonged political solution when you will have the federalization or even confederalization of whatever will be remaining from Ukraine by the time it's all done, you know, said and done. And some parts probably will go faster. Let's say one of the scenarios, let's say voting for joining Russia, let's say Odessa. Could it happen? That's why, by the way, they were Western Ukrainians, so they, especially Benderites, were trying to remove the Eastern Ukrainian and Russian population and Jewish population from Odessa and resettle. There was a whole program, resettle those Western Ukrainians into Odessa, which historically is a Russian city. It was built by Russians. So, and we have this scenario, possibly the other one. Who knows? Maybe even military scenario is not, you know, off the table in terms of Odessa and Nikolaev. So I don't know, but there are a number of the possibilities or number of the contingencies, if you wish. And we have to look at the decision tree, how Russian military political top will make its decision, or how the decision tree will progress depending on all kinds of nexuses. For now, United States is pretending then it negotiates in good faith. Russians are not idiots. They know you cannot sign anything with the United States or with the West. It means nothing. So, and this is you know, this prolonged game of diplomats, you know, positioning themselves, or Russians are probably second best after Chinese people in terms of pulling the cats by the gonads, you know, so by balls to make this long, tedious process, because it could last for years. If Trump walks as he promises, he promised it a long time ago. I don't know why he's still not working. And we know actually why he's still not working. But yeah, he said what, 30th now? 30th of April, nothing changes, you know, nothing achieved. I'm working. Russians keep their fingers crossed like, dude, yeah, please, go. You know, because United States is what was the main engine behind that. And Mr. Trump, obviously, with his first administration, he played a critical role in arming and reforming Ukrainian military to really attack Russia.
Yeah, what is strange about America's posturing now as a mediator is that, you know, even Marco Rubio recognizes now or argues that this is a proxy war. And in this proxy war, well, what it doesn't say out loud, but what is evident within this proxy war, the United States is really a leading participant. This is, to a large extent, a proxy war between NATO and Russia. And when we say NATO, the United States is
Isn't
the
it?
only irrelevant or main actor at least. So this is an American Russian conflict. So it is interesting how they position themselves now as being, well, we're the mediator. We're going to try to negotiate an end to this. but they are the main actor. But this is how I interpret it as well. Well, this mediation, if it's about walking away, then it's effectively handing over responsibility to a war which has been lost to the Europeans. I mean, it's a bit like Afghanistan. We have the already planes out on the runway. People are trying to flee, and the Americans are trying to sign this over as being the Europeans' mess, and the Europeans responding in the way that they want to fill America's shoes and essentially take over. They seem more than willing to take responsibility for this mess. So it's quite absurd, to watch. But but you spoke about Trump walking away, is because he keeps saying that this is not his war. It's not his war. It's Biden's war. But he's been fighting Russia now for 100 days with the U.S. Army in this proxy war. So surely, if he continues this will be Trump's war, won't it?
Well, it is already. Doug
Yeah.
McGregor, who knows it all, he already stated unequivocally it's his war now. And Trump is. Listen, he has gained a bunch of the losers there. Those losers are called American generals. They never won anything in their life. They lose all their wars. And after that, they blame it on the politicians, of course. But the point is, you have people like Kellogg. The guy is a loser. All of them are, And the point that they still cannot recognize is just like they have to drop the pretense. They are not even in the same league militarily as Russia. They never were, actually, except for the U.S. Navy, which had this, brilliant, fight, so to speak, and war in the Pacific. And even then, they needed the Red Army's help to, defeat Kwantung Army in China, which was 1 million strong, and things of this nature. But the point is, these guys lost all their wars. They never won anything. Well, they defeated Grenada, and they had the Turkish shoot against the semi-literate Iraqi army. But the point is that this is not even serious. And those guys are driven by their egos. They have been convinced through complete confabulation and rewriting of the history of the 20th century by British primarily and American historians, establishment historians, who just, they couldn't take it. They couldn't take it that Soviet Union defeated Nazi Germany largely, that basically Axis forces in Europe, that Soviet Union was first in space and things of this nature. It was supposed to be the shining hill on the shining city on the hill, and somewhere they have those Russians, who constantly, basically interfere with you. And as a result, you saw yourself what they did to not only the United States, what they did also to Europe. And now you have this whole class of people who have no national loyalties. They're highly uncultured. People very often mistake their refinement, like driving Lamborghinis and drinking very expensive scotch, for culture. Well, in reality, of course, if you look at those elites, German elite, look at them. They are imbeciles, basically. Annalena Baerbock, just one of the example, or same goes there. And Trump stuffed his administration again, with the exception of Tulsi Gabbard, who is definitely a woman who has some integrity, and she understands what she is doing. Look at them. Look at the Kellogg's. Look at all those generals. What can they possibly advise Trump? So he created. Look at his national security advisor, Mike Waltz. He's a loser. He was like, oh yeah, it was 75th, the Ranger Regiment. Okay, have you seen the real war? No. U.S. Army doesn't know what real war is. Even when you look at their documents and everything, it is written for beating basically the excrement out of the third world powers, even if not the fourth. And that's what happened. And now they come to face the reality, and they cannot take it easily. There are many human issues there. There are many mental issues there.
So I guess the direction of the war now seems likely as the war is being lost by Ukraine and NATO, and the United States decides to step away. and the Europeans will try to keep this going without the Americans. I'm wondering then how likely it is that the war will spread or trigger between Russia and some of the European countries, because I don't think anyone wants this, but the rules of the proxy war, it keeps changing. I mean, it's worth remembering that Biden himself argued that F-16s means World War III, but now, of course, we escalated long past this a long time ago, and indeed, by the end of 24, we saw some NATO countries engaging in strikes on Russia with these long-range missiles, which is recognized to be operated by Americans as well. So, but it's Russia always had a dilemma, because either it retaliates and risks World War III, or it doesn't retaliate. But then, of course, it would embolden NATO, and as you read in the papers all the time, Russia doesn't dare to respond. It's proven it won't stand up for its red line, all of this. So, but if the United States pull away, then two things happens. One, the Europeans must escalate dramatically, I think, to make up for the US losses. Possibly, the British talking about planes in Ukraine, this and that. And the second thing that happened is that Russia has less to risk from retaliating if they don't get into a direct war with the Americans. So, so I'm just wondering, given how we're still keep changing the rules of this proxy war, how likely do you think that we're gonna end up in a war between Russia and the Europeans? Again, I think rationally does make sense, but I feel reason has been thrown out the window a while ago.
The main question which you have to ask is, with what will European NATO fight Russia? That's the main issue. I'll give you the spread. The whole ground army of United Kingdom will fail to fill the whole new Wembley Stadium. The mighty, I'm being facetious, mighty army of France, which is the best army of Europe, is 113,000. It's less than Russians have on one operational axis in Ukraine. The technical readiness of the French army, let's say their famed Leclerc tank, which they do not want to supply, they don't want to supply Ukraine with Leclerc tanks, because obviously, well, they will end up the same as with Abrams and everything. And hey, Russians have to, those guys who fight there, they have mortgages. They would love to kill Leclercs too, as they did with the Leopards, which was supposed to be the best tank in the world, which it is not. So it's all bluff. And so out of 222 active Leclercs, which France has, they probably have about, their technical readiness ranges between 15 to 35%. So they have now like what, 180 aircraft, like Rafales and all those Mirages. About a third of them, it can fly. United Kingdom can provide probably like 10 Tornadoes and probably 15 F-35s. You see, that's the problem. If Europe wants to go and fight Russia, they can only one way to defeat Russians. And believe me, I'm not doing the worst part of the, let's say, Sun Tzu truisms, like don't underestimate the enemy. The only way they can defeat Russia is by killing Russians with the hernias from the Homeric laughter. Okay? Let's face it, and that's military professional tells you who. So Europe is impotent militarily. I'm just, in order for you to go and do something, there are still common sense people there. That's why, by the way, they are desperate and hysterical, because they understand their bluff was called. I mean, mighty Bundeswehr is a joke, as I already stated. They probably can get up those Eurofighters, probably 12 of them. Yeah, British can provide another 8, 9 Eurofighters. It's literally, these are dysfunctional armed forces. The only reason, I'll give you one hint, just to illustrate it. And many people say that it was Obama's hand was forced. It was France, Italy, and United Kingdom who decided to fight Mr. Gaddafi. And they started the war. Well, guess what? They ran out of the smart munition within 72 hours. And they started begging United States to come on board. And this is Libya. This is the guy, Gaddafi, who never wanted to continue the real military, cooperation with Russia and things of this nature. 72 hours, they were out of any kind of modern munitions. You think so? It got better? No. It got much worse because now, as I already take any country there, which are the major players. Remove French nuclear deterrent, which are the only 4 strategic missile submarines of the Letron Fan class, and they have the Mirage 2000, whatever the 5F, what I don't remember, which can carry this funny cruise missile with a range of 300 kilometers. That's everything they have in terms of the nuclear weapons. Remove that. They are the third world army with some shiny and expensive toys. When you look at that, they cannot produce even the supersonic anti-shipping missile, all of them. United States cannot produce, neither can they. And so you begin to look attentively at what constitutes the TOE, Table of the Equipment, Organization and Equipment. It is the table of organization of equipment of armies and armed forces stuck in 1990. That's what it is. So they want to go to the end. Of course, Russian mobilization potential, while not as large as European one, but Russia doesn't have to. I mean, there are so many newest weapon systems which can completely decapitate. Russians openly say, yeah, if you want to start war, yeah, hide in your bunkers under Brussels. It will be much better, collect yourself, accumulate yourself, that we kill you at once. And that's what it is, without even nuclear weapons. And that's all bluff. All of it is bluff. The only thing they can probably produce is continue to supply some small arms and some maybe man pads, shoulder, carried stingers type things. So yeah, other than that, it's impotent.
Yeah, I heard something similar recently in a talk I had with George Beebe, the former CI director for Russia analysis. He pointed out also that the Europeans had a bit of a problem with this, that there was no strategy because, in strategy you need, here's your objectives, and but it has to account for the means to reach those ends.
Absolutely.
There has to be, but there's a huge disconnect, and I think it accurately points out that this is largely because of how emotional everyone become in Europe. There's no strategic thinking; they're very emotional. So, again, what it means is because of these emotions, they keep setting this huge, unrealistic goals. So, no, Russia will withdraw to the 91 borders. On their way out, they will have to pay reparations. They will, will set up trials for Moscow. And even now, at the final stages, when we see that we lost the war, they're still talking, the EU about setting up tribunals for Russian leaders. And if anyone pushed back against this, saying, listen, this is not achievable objectives, then, they're met with suspicions. Like, why are you trying to defend the Russians? Are you legitimizing them? Are you supporting their narratives? So there's no scope anymore for reason. There's just, again, this emotion set these crazy objectives, which can't be covered by the means. And we end up in very vulnerable positions. And there's no way to get out of this. And so I'm wondering if this could explain it, because, again, I mentioned this.
Well, it's very simple. Let's face it, Europe hates Russia. Europeans, majority, not all, I don't know what the percentage is, 65. It varies by the countries. If you take a look at Sputnik, 2017 no less, before all that, poll, you can very easily find it. Only about quarter, French even less than that, Europeans consider Russians a European people. For Russians do not have any more illusions about, and these are Europeans, not some, then idiotic leaders, which they elected. France elected Macron, let France enjoy it. Hey, You elected the guy with a landslide. You cannot say that he is illegitimate. He is a legitimate leader of France. This is what French people wanted. So, and they do not consider Russians European people. And finally, Russia said, all right, we're good with that. And fact is, just get the hell out of us, away from us. And so when you look at this, that's what it is, and nothing can change. And that is why they're hysterical, because it's century-old attitude towards Russians. Some huge, large portions of population, or for example, political elites like in Washington, like James Clapper, he used to be the guy who was responsible for the whole intelligence. They consider Russians subhumans. He openly stated that Russians are genetically challenged, they're predisposed for stealing, and things of this nature. So Russians finally stated that, yes, good, we are ready to be Asiatic barbarians and we are not Europeans. And that's good, because that's what it is. People have to understand that Russians do not have, and you probably know this as well as me, that for Russians, they know that for Europe, 9th of May, Victory Day, with the exception of the stupid British, I mean, they could have been part of it. But other than that, I mean, for Europe, it's a sad day, because combined Europe was defeated. Many people forget that we had Finnish army fighting the Red Army. We had the Hungarians, Italians, Romanians, it just didn't go on and on. Spanish divisions, French SS divisions, so it's just like, look at this, like, yeah, that's Europe. So, and it was always like that. French laid under Hitler without even offering serious fight. The Petain government, Vichy, they were they collaborated big time with Nazi Germany, So, and Russians recognized it. They do not want to, dance around it, as it was during the Soviet times, when there was the ideological vector, so to speak, that, well, yeah, we are maybe Marxists, but we still want to be the part of Europe. Russians do not want to be the part of Europe today. That's the whole thing. And Russians have much bigger fish to fry in, obviously, consolidating and unifying the Eurasian landmass economically, together with China, which is a huge economically it's gigantic, it dwarfs Europe. And then of course Russia has to find the modus vivendi with the United States, not because Russians particularly love the United States, but it's two superpowers which can easily obliterate the world 5 times over. So you have to find the means of coexisting and do some, at least maintain diplomatic relations and things of this nature. But yeah, the romance between Russia and combined West is over. It is dead, dead, dead. So those Europeans and Westerners in general who come to Russia today, they are all met with the open arms, but I mean, generally as civilizations, the incompatibility have been completely proven.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, because often we look at a lot of the breaking points or front between Russia and Europe now. We often point, the military tensions, economic decoupling, but the political or societal ties. This is quite interesting, because I know a few Russian liberals as well who seems very convinced that the West only has a problem with Putin. If it was someone else there, they would embrace the Russians. But I think a lot of them, they changed their mentality, it seems, over the past, especially the past 2-3 years now. And again, when a lot of these policies were pushed, I don't think in Europe we thought this one through, because when we start banning Russian athletes, chess players, tourists, Russian literature, ballet, you had the former American ambassador McFaul arguing there's no innocent Russians anymore. This kind of things, I think a lot of them start to question whether or not, wait, do the West hate Putin, or do they hate all Russians? And
no, they hate Russians. Yeah, it's McFaul is an imbecile. He's a mentally challenged man, and this shows you the utter degeneracy of the Western political institution, because how the hell, first, don't forget, the guy not only was ambassador in Russia and he was a laughing stock there, but the guy is considered in Stanford or whatever, Berkeley, whatever the hell the degree mill he's working for, it's that he's considered a Russian scholar. The guy doesn't know the first thing about what, and he has PhD. It's Mencken's famous, that morons with a PhD, as he wrote in 1920s. He was prescient, So there you go. That's who we have. And yeah, you're absolutely correct that it's not just political elites, and then that has been recognized by Russian people, as I already stated last time. I believe when we spoke about it, I mentioned this, which is shocking actually. In 2021, even before the start of the special military operation, Russians have been polled how they identify yourselves. 64% of Russians identified themselves as not Europeans, while 20% have been ambiguous about it. You can bet whatever you want today that overwhelming majority of Russians not only do not identify themselves as Europeans, they do not want to identify themselves as Europeans. So, and after the opening of the Olympic Games in Paris, opening ceremony, I think, and when you so-called Russian liberals, which are essentially pro-Western shills who were financed by USAID and all that, even if they begin to change those opinions, that tells you something, that finally the point was driven home. I was writing about this for 10 years now. Now it has become the reality of the Russian society at large, and they do not want to be associated in any way with Europe. The Russian, so to speak, trip of the last 300 years to be incorporated with Europe is over. And yes, they will forbid, they will sabotage, they will do whatever they can to damage Russia or sabotage her. But yes, normal Europeans, people with their traditional values, with their honor, human integrity, if they feel really badly living in, let's say, Germany or France, they are welcome to Russia. It was one of the genius movements by Putin to open this 3-year visas without any requirements for people who share what is called, I don't remember the name of the executive order, but it was the traditional values something. So, and yeah, there are many Europeans who are moving into Russia now.
Oh yeah, I actually know one guy who's trying to make it in there. Well, it's a long time ago. Anyways, I wanted to ask you just shortly about the divisions though within the U.S. because I found this proposals coming from Kellogg and Witkoff. They were so astonishingly different. Again, Witkoff seems to accept that you have to deal with the underlying causes, and he actually listened to the Russian side and the extent to which Russia demands restoring again the neutrality of Ukraine and the territorial concessions, all this, while as we know Kellogg outlined something looking like the division of Germany, and again European peacekeepers. Well, he had a different name for them, but anyways, it will still be NATO troops. But they're so different. What do you make of this? Is this a way for Trump to make deals, or to show here's two options? If you play your cards right, well, depends which way we'll go, or is this just chaos and divisions within the ranks?
Yeah, it's chaos. And again, don't forget, Kellogg is a loser. He's a laughing stock among Russian military professionals. He, like pretty much most of the American generals, he's a loser. He never won anything in his life, and he doesn't understand modern war. He's 80 years old. He's a neocon, So yeah, that's Trump. He hires people. Obviously, Trump needs to pay back, so to speak, pay back in quotation marks to Miriam Adelson and those other, donors. And so, but Russians already stated, we're not talking about Kellogg. And again, that would have been funny. I would love to be there when they would, let's say, Mr. Surovikin, as the negotiator from Russian side, would meet Mr. Kellogg. He would be looking at him as at the flea, so because that's who they are, American military have been utterly discredited. And so when you look at this, yeah, that's Trump's administration, okay? It's a chaos. He did some good things, and some pulled some good appointments, like Kash Patel for FBI director and Tulsi Gabbard as the chief of the national, intelligence. But the rest of it, just you look at this, good Lord, I mean, what the hell is he trying to accomplish? And it's not working out. He really believed, I believe, that when he talks to Kellogg, the guy have issues with mathematics. He evidently doesn't understand what modern warfare is. He is completely fed with the Ukrainian propaganda. That's why he thinks that Russians lost 700,000 killed. I mean, no real military or intel professional would ever buy this, but he did. And so when you look at that, what can I say? It's Trump administration, okay? And I begin to lean more and more and agree with Doug McGregor that it is Trump's war now. Another matter, that United States also, as a Europe, is militarily impotent. They literally have nothing more to send, which will be annihilated even if they find something. So, and the bluff was called, military industrial bluff of the United States has been called. And yeah, Western weapons have been paraded. I mean, it is pathetic, honestly. No, they still can kill, make no mistake, they do kill. But all this, pathos-ridden mythology about some kind of technological, they're technologically inferior. Some of them are lagging behind not just one generation, but 2 generations of weapons. And that is why he is probably in a bind right now. Yeah, but he decided that these are his people. And so he has Vitkov, who is definitely a smart man. He is definitely intellectually honest. And you have this Kellogg guy. And whatever Trump decides, let him decide whatever he wants. At this stage, it doesn't matter. I'll give you one example. Even if the United States will mobilize all of its armed forces now and try to fight Russia, admitting that Russia somehow allows them to pre-deploy and then deploy, they're not going to fight for very long. And actually, it will be the United States which will go nuclear because they have no capability to fight Russia conventionally. Simple as that. And I wrote the first book, Losing Military Supremacy, 8 years ago. I already stated, I mean, these people do not understand what is happening. They simply have no grasp because they convinced themselves, they wrote this history books about themselves, how great they are, how they defeated, Hitler, very small help with those Russian sideshow, where they killed 80% of the creme de la creme of the Axis forces. But yeah, we are the look at this, we killed, so many in Iraq war. And people were saying, including Russian generals, stop already that guys, this was not real war. But they lied to themselves. And as the result, there you go,
Yeah, I probably agree with you on the Kellogg issue because I posted a video of him on where he gave that speech at that table that we are this acme of professionalism. We're killing Russians and knocking them out from the high ranks of high great powers, and we're not even losing Americans. We're fighting with Ukrainians. And I posted it because I thought it was wrong on many levels. One, strategic. You don't pick a fight with Russia if you can't win, and no matter who you fight with. And second, it was just the immorality of it that we're only fighting with Ukrainians.
Well, yeah,
not even
don't
our
expect
people.
morality from
Yeah,
American generals.
but
And Kellogg is professionally incompetent, as most of them are. And so he doesn't understand operations. He doesn't understand technology. He can't. and he doesn't have the serious engineering background. So the guy is still, he is hurting like McCain, late John McCain was hurting. His Russophobia was absolutely driven by the fact that he was shot down actually by a Soviet missile. Actually, he was shot down by the combat crew of the Vietnamese air defense officers. But of course, were trained by Russians, and Russians gave them S-75 air defense complex. But yeah, this is how it's driven. And Kellogg, he's a loser. He accomplished nothing in his life, military-wise. He's the part of the army which loses all of its wars. And as a result, he has this complex of inferiority, which has to manifest itself in like bad mouthing and pretending that somehow he understands what military professionalism is. He is not. He, as I already stated, he is laughed at by serious military officers. I know it firsthand, high-ranking officers, like the guy who is like, he's a moron, basically, but that's Trump thing, he invited Mr. Mattis as Secretary of Defense at some point of time, just as he explained to him, he sounds good and he looks good in uniform. Well, there you go. That's your criteria. There you go. What do you expect?
Yeah, there's some lack of professionalism there, but
that's complete lack of professionalism.
Well, this, what I thought was fun is General Kellogg. He wrote me back on Twitter saying, "Oh, this is Sun Tzu stuff he was into," because and it was just for me, it was just crazy that this is that this is the great genius plans they're working with.
No, I mean the American military education, top bottom. I mean, with the exception of some critical engineering parts such as U.S. Military Academy, Naval Academy, or U.S. Air Force Academy, it's a joke. What do they teach them in war colleges or command and staff college in Leavenworth, Kansas? I don't know. They probably teach them about how United States defeated, alien invasion. They probably watched the Independence Day as the documentary or Top Gun, but that's what it comes across because people evidently do not understand the first thing. They have this technology, much of which is not really viable on the modern battlefield, but they convince themselves that they are good. If you're so good, how come you lose your wars against the enemy, which actually decides to shoot back? Forget about their peer. And that's the problem. And I wrote all 4 of my books specifically about this. They obviously never awoken, and now it's too late. And the point is, I'm beginning to lean more towards the fact that, Doug McGregor was correct, that it is Trump's war.
Yeah, my last question is just on what you think, based on your experience, what Russia will do next, because for me it looked as if Russia was prepared to make huge concessions on this deal by Trump, but then I started to think more about it, and it could just be great PR because like the Russians came off as being very accommodating. But Zelensky dismissed it immediately, and as his former advisor, Alexei Arestovich, pointed out, so what are you doing? You're making the Russians seem like the kind, accommodating, peace-loving people, who's willing to make concessions. Meanwhile, his former boss Zelensky is just dismissing it out of hand before they even have the meeting in London. So it just, and then, of course, predictably, Trump administration, Marco Rubio and them cancel it. They don't show up. And now Trump might walk away and looking more favorable at the Russians. And he didn't even take anything from the Russians. It was, so I'm wondering if the Russians would have accepted the concessions which are reported in Financial Times. And if not, where do you see the Russians going now?
Yeah.
Are they going for victory or?
Yeah. Anything UK tabloids, The Economist, which is run by an American, Financial Times, The Times, it's all garbage. It's all tabloids. Those people who work there, they are just pulling everything out of their behinds, and they do, again, most of what now the propaganda, which is propaganda machine, the Goebbelsonian, many of those people actually could be charged with war crimes. For example, the editorial board of Financial Times, yeah, those are spinning and spewing their primarily Ukrainian propaganda, and of course they're working for themselves. So it cannot be taken seriously whatsoever. That is why Peskov and his statement was again drowned in all this, well, that's what media are, they're whores, okay, by definition. And so Peskov stated, don't trust them, listen to the primary sources. But guess what they do? They also take the primary sources and, begin to spin them. So, and journalism as such is not a profession, it's not a craft. And I don't want to go into Hunter's definition of journalism in the, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, but we all know this definition and who they are. So you cannot trust establishment media in the West, period. I mean, these are the Goebbelsonian propaganda machine. And as Mr. Lavrov actually had to talk to this bimbo, Elizabeth Brennan, or whatever the hell her name, from CBS, you can see yourself. They are provocateurs. They have no human integrity, professional integrity. They just do what they are told to do. So in this case, it is all PR trying to portray Russia as weak and trying to get West, some kind of the imaginary victory, because this is the only thing they are capable of. The military victory have been already, achieved. It's just a matter of the arrangement stage now, how this whole thing will end. But as I already quoted Doug McGregor, I think it is Trump's war. Trump's, obviously, he is no Russophile. He hates Putin because he understands how much superior as a human and statesman Putin is. But he believes that somehow he's genius and he's narcissist, and he will get things much worse than we have them today. Unless, of course, he walks as he promised. But, of course, it's Trump's promise. That means what? It's not worth a word which was spoken on the paper it was signed on. So, as the result, we're still in this waiting period, but Russians continue to roll to the West. And not that Russians want to govern those people, because, for example, even after 10 years, you have issues with the corruption and all that in those republics, former republics, which are now part of Russian Federation. And it will take even longer after this Ukrainian way of life, so to speak, if you take those parts on your balance. But look at this, Russians are closing on Sumy now, and they are already in Kharkov Oblast. We'll have to wait and see, we'll see.
Well, Andrei Martyanov, thank you again for your time. It's been very interesting, so thanks.
My pleasure.